Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to this AMAS webinar series on sustainable asset management, a series of 4 sessions exclusively dedicated to our members on the latest EU and Swiss regulatory developments in sustainable asset management. Last month, we had the opportunity to deep dive into the EU sustainability regulations, focusing on the latest omnibus package with our colleagues based in Brussels. And today, and for the 3 remaining webinars, we will focus on Switzerland and the latest developments regarding the AMAS self-regulation. This second webinar will provide you with an overview of the AMAS Self-Regulation 2.1 that is now available on the AMAS website. We have the pleasure to go through the agenda and start basically with Adrian, whom we have the pleasure to have with us for the beginning of the session, who will provide some words of introduction. After Guillaume Toffel will go through an overview of the green finance regulation that we observe and that are ongoing in Switzerland. We'll then deep dive and provide you some words of context in terms of the background of this version 2.1 of the self-regulation, and we'll then go through the main change with you. We will also go through the upcoming and further clarifications that are still pending and that are upcoming before going through the next steps and provide you with a bit of an overview of how we tackle the sustainability and more broadly, and as well as the self-regulatory topic within AMAS. So quite a packed program, but without further ado, I'll let Adrian start with some introductory remarks.
Thank you, Aurélia, and good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure to have you all here on this call. Look, I thought I will give you a quick update on where we see the topic sustainable finance, sustainable asset management in the context of AMAS and the wider industry. And I start with a question that I have heard quite often in the last few weeks. Is sustainable finance, sustainability still a priority for AMAS, for our industry, given the headwinds in the US, given some negative press, perceived lower investor interest? And I'd just like to reiterate that our commitment to sustainability, to sustainable finance is unchanged. And if I say we, then this is very much on the back of what I hear in the AMAS board. There's a very clear conviction, the topic sustainability, and not a surprise. I mean, we observe it every day. This topic is here to stay. And that means for the industry, its relevance is unchanged. And I see the commitment across our members. It's not you do sustainable finance because you think, well, it may help me in my product promotion efforts, or because it sounds good and we're all good people. No, the commitment is here because it is the right thing to do. I mean, climate risk, our investment risk, and no decent investment process could work without factoring in sustainability risk. So a very clear message, this topic is here to stay. A bit on the same token, we're asked, will we still pursue the AMAS self-regulation on sustainable asset management with the same commitment? We actually hear some complaints saying we shouldn't have done this today. It's no longer necessary. As we can see, we have invested too much effort on this. And also here, I like to be very clear. Today, if there was no self-regulation as it is, we would do exactly the same. And just as a reminder, this self-regulation is far more than just about sustainable finance. You know this greenwashing topic and how much it got covered in the media. Having a self-regulation, having an established standard for the industry, combating greenwashing, This is all about the integrity, the credibility of our industry. And after all, this is the highest good. So we will definitely not step back. Also, the self-regulation on sustainable finance is here to stay. Maybe a bit of color here on the back of recent discussions. We had Stefan Walter at our Asset Management Day last week, and the topic whether a self-regulation is sufficient or not, whether it needs a state regulation, that's ongoing. And we heard Stefan Walter, he leans towards a state-led regulation. Now, very important, if we prefer self-regulation, this is not because we fundamentally disagree or object with a state-led regulation. Let us remind us why we give preference to a self-regulation, an industry self-regulation. We always claim this topic, sustainable finance, is so much in flux. There's so many dynamics there in terms of terminology, global developments. And in such an environment, a self-regulation has just a lot of advantages. It's much more flexible. You can adjust. Let's look a bit forward and think about SFDR. There's going to be changes, and most likely they will have an impact on our self-regulation. And we can adjust this within a couple of months. Whereas a state-led regulation, it may take years to adjust. So if one day, if a state-led regulation is introduced and it builds on our self-regulation, who knows? That may be a good, right thing. It's just not the right thing to do it now. There was one point, however, I took away from the speech of Stefan Walter at the Asset Management Day, where he said one reason why he still thinks it needs a state-led regulation is that we need to make sure that we have consistent standards across the whole industry, be it at the point of sale, be it at product level. And that is a valid point, and this is something we have to take very serious. Across the industry, we have a self-regulation from the Swiss Banking Association, the Insurance Association, and AMAS. Now you can say these are the most important associations, and probably right. But still, there's more. There are other product types. There are other areas with a point of sale that are not covered. And it is up to us in the coming years to make sure we offer a comprehensive framework, as comprehensive as possible, and not allow for uncovered gaps. This brings me finally to AMAS, to our self-regulation. Today, we're going to hear about changes, important changes, particularly in the field of audit and derived from this enforcement. I wished we could also give you an update on another important topic. Does exclusion and integration qualify as sustainability or as a sustainable investment? Unfortunately, we cannot. There was a board intervention last week, and the intervention was, hey, we need more time to discuss this. And look, that may be slowing us down. It may be a bit disappointing, but again, we're an association, and different members offer different perspectives. And it's important that all our members, and also at board level, they have the opportunity to express their views. And Guillaume will tell you how we're going to address this topic and what is the planned time horizon. If I can generalize this part a bit, look, our self-regulation will keep ongoing, developing. It is evolving. That's the nature of a self-regulation. It's actually, as I said, the strengths of a self-regulation. But that said, we're very mindful of the speed and the steps we want to take. We know perfectly well that implementing a self-regulation is not something you do within a flip of a second. It takes work, it takes resources, it comes with changes in the organization. And we're very mindful of doing any changes, the future involvement, that we do this in the right sequence and at the right pace. What we don't want to do is moving goalposts while you're in the middle of implementing. So we need to balance these two sides. We want to improve, we want to offer a holistic framework to the government, and at the same time, we are very, very much aware that implementing a self-regulation is something that takes time, particularly if you want to get it right. With this, I hand back to Guillaume, or over to Guillaume, for his update on the self-regulation. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Adrian, and thanks for being here. So good afternoon, dear members, also from my side. After this introduction, we can switch, as mentioned by Aurélia previously, to a very brief overview of green finance. You know these slides, there are a couple of them, but as a general reminder, this is where we are in the green finance regulation lato sensu. So we already spoke abundantly about the FINMA circular on nature financial risks. You remember AMAS provided feedback there, and that this circular will enter into force in stages as of January next year. Self-regulation, here we are moving towards 2.1, which is available on our website, as Aurélia mentioned previously. The audit programs are being translated as we speak and will be available next week in the 3 languages. Obviously, we'll touch upon the other changes pertaining to self-regulation 2.1 later on this afternoon. Swiss climate scores, nothing new there. Also, we are just remind you that they are in force and optional. Moving on to the next slide, which is maybe the only one who has changed since we last met in our various events and other webinars. You'll remember we took part in the 3 first on the 3 first topics. So that meaning the ordinance on climate disclosures, the climate protection ordinance, and the revision of the code of obligations. On the very day we sent our position to the CIF regarding the ordinance on climate disclosures, the Federal Council published its Marschalt, as you all know. So for the time being, we have everything is on hold in that regard. Members have asked us to provide more clarity about the various work streams which we try to represent here. So you see that now we have 2 separate federal work streams. On the one side, we have preventing greenwashing, which you all know, and that's why we are here today, because the Federal Council took a decision last June refraining from introducing state regulation and chose the self-regulation way, as Adrian mentioned. We know, and we will talk a little bit more about this later on, that the CIF started its assessment in April this year on the self-regulation. And we know also from the communication of the Federal Council that we have until the end of 2027 at the latest to show the government how we manage our self-regulation, which leaves us roughly a maximum of a year and a half. So that's the preventing greenwashing work stream. And on the other work stream, what the Federal Council calls sustainable corporate governance, meaning the 3 columns we had on the slide before. You all remember the CEO revision consultation that led to almost 700 pages of consultations that were digested by the Federal Department of Finance and which ended mid-October last year. As I just mentioned before, the Marschalt decision at the end of March this year, and in this work stream we have a tighter timeline because the Federal Council decided to take its decision after the EU is going to announce its decision on the plan simplification, so meaning omnibus, and there we have a deadline no later than spring 2026. Obviously, we will monitor the situation and keep you posted on that. Now, before we move to the changes that you will see in the various versions published of self-regulation 2.1, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background of where we are and where we come from. So as you all know, the self-regulation 2.0, actually we were presenting it to you exactly in June last year. So what's the status today? Today, I think we have a major step forward, and we'll come back to that a little bit later on, with the enforcement enabled by the audit program, which has been worked out hand in hand by Experts Suisse and AMAS. What has changed also is that the Q&A became really dynamic, and that we have an ongoing member education through typically these kinds of webinars. We have also worked out selective adjustments based on member feedback, and the board was informed last March. We also completed real estate fund specific work with our respective working groups that worked quite intensively in that domain. More on that also a little bit later. As I mentioned before, we already updated and discussed with the CIF this version 2.1 last April. The CIF was, I think, was really greeted the work of the industry. If I understood correctly, AMAS opened the way and were followed closely by SPA and SIA. We exchanged on the opportunity of not having a taxonomy, and I think the CIF mentioned again that FINMA is not going to recognize the self-regulation due to the lack of a legal basis. But overall, CIF greeted the industry's work and mentioned, as I was telling before, that they are starting their assessment. So meaning the assessment, obviously, whether the self-regulations of the three associations are enough to prevent greenwashing, and that's due for 2027, as I just mentioned before. In that regard, there will be a crucial need for data in order for the three associations to be able to provide an accurate situation to the CIF for their assessment. So we will obviously come back to you with separate questionnaires to give us the data we need to enable the CIF to do its assessment. Adrian mentioned it in the introduction just before. We had the board last Thursday, just before the Asset Management Day. And this board took the decision to validate this version 2.1. The board decided also to send the ESG integration exclusion issue to our new expert committee, but we'll touch on that a little bit later. Where are we today? So today we published the new self-regulation, and obviously we will have more improvements coming, especially regarding the Bausteine, but more on that in jiffy. You all remember that when we spoke to you last June, we had we had almost closed the gaps identified by CIF. You all remember those 9 gaps. Gaps 8 and 9 were still open, and now today, only 1 year afterwards, we're closing the gaps with the new audit program, which we'll touch upon a little bit today and more next Tuesday in our third webinar. Let's just remember here that what enabled AMAS to continue with the self-regulation alone, that means without any Mantelverordnung, without the state regulation, is the fact that we are filling these gaps. So that's really of paramount importance. We strongly believe at the association and along with the members that fill our working groups or expert committees, that self-regulation 2.1 is a stronger version. On the one hand, we always mentioned, and we are really transparent, that self-regulation is a living document. So it's not about creating moving targets, but it's about evolving and enhancing something that is already existing now. So it was already mentioned twice, but we will clarify the situation regarding ESG integration and exclusion. We will publish Bausteine for real estate funds. We will update the Bausteine for securities funds. And this is all part of the self-regulation being a living document. I think this version also provides more clarity for the industry. And obviously, as we were publishing it, we also took the advantage to do a minor cleanup of the self-regulation. So yeah, with the audit program, we achieved the audit part, and we have the cornerstone of the whole self-regulation concept. And we think that we close all the gaps on our side. That being said, I think it's about time we deep dive into the main changes. And Aurélia will join me for that also. We will comment on the various changes of self-regulation 2.1. On the website, you will also find, obviously, for our members, the track change versions, which will enable you to spot immediately what we changed from 2.0 to 2.1. And Aurélia, I'll let you comment the overall
Thank you.
changes, which we'll talk about later.
Thank you very much. So now let's deep dive into the main changes related to this 2.1 version of the self-regulation. You can see on the screen now all the different articles and appendixes where we've made some modifications or clarifications. So we'll deep dive into each of them just after this introduction. But basically, first, we touch upon the definition, we touch upon the scope. It's been alluded to numerous times. The audit program and the audit article is a key improvement as well of this version. We have also amendments related to a new article related to new members. And finally, as well, it took our working group, real estate, ESG, a lot of time and work dedicated to basically work on the different approaches of sustainability for real estate funds and the different also goals that are specified for real estate funds, and we'll touch upon that as well. Moving on to the definition part. So first, the definitions. There was definitely a need for further clarification on what to be done for collective assets that do not meet the sustainability definition developed in the AMAS self-regulation in the Article 3 that you can see in detail on the screen. And in the case where a collective asset is not considered to have sustainability characteristic, it should be made very clear that the portfolio is not managed sustainably. So that's what you can see here, this addition in green on this slide. So this clarification is important to ensure that even there is basically a precision about what to do when a collective asset is not considered or managed sustainably. Just as a reminder, and that doesn't change actually, you'll find here what Article 3 of the AMAS self-regulation entails in terms of sustainability definitions. So besides the pure financial goal, there needs to be a sustainability goal. And that goal needs to meet 3 different criteria. One is it needs to be defined with a well-defined reference framework. 70%, there's a threshold of 17% of the portfolio that needs to be aligned or to contribute to that sustainability goal. And finally, this sustainability goal needs to include specific indicators in order to measure and monitor that goal. Besides, there is, and that was basically based on the position of the Federal Council on greenwashing from December 2022, this differentiation between basically a product that is aligned to a sustainability goal or that is contributing to the sustainability goal. So that needs to be specified as well. And finally, and this is more to provide a bit of color and to also link also this self-regulation 2.0 with the self-regulation, with the first version of the self-regulation, where the sustainability approaches were a key element of that very first version. Putting things together, here we have, and that's also highlighted in Appendix 3, basically a few examples of a few market practice as to how institutes are currently looking at alignment to a sustainability goal. So usually it's best done by using, for instance, best-in-class or positive screening approach, a thematic approach, or climate alignment approach. And when it comes to contribution to sustainability goals, then the 2 main approaches that are relevant there is mostly stewardship as well as impact. Then you see on the left-hand side everything else that is basically considered as a non-sustainable. With that, I think we can move to the next amendment, and I leave it back to you, Guillaume, on the scope.
Thanks, Aurélia. So we also changed Article 4, including the LQIFs. And this is a typical example of how swift the industry can react with a self-regulation. I think Adrian mentioned that in the intro as well. When we drafted Self-Regulation 2.0, we were in a rush and we were in the last days of 2023, and LKIF was only in the making. So that's a minor change, but it also means that sustainability is not only here to stay, but it's true across all the possibilities offered by the legal framework for products in Switzerland. Moving on to Article 30 bis. So some of you will tell us, yes, but Article 30 bis was already in there in Self-Regulation 2.0. That's correct. However, Article 30 bis has been completely redrafted. So we have a whole new article. Again, when we drafted former Article 30 bis in December 2023, we were rushed and we had an audit article drafted by lawyers, which was perhaps not the very best of ideas. So to comment on this article, and as I mentioned before, our next webinar number 3 of the series is going to be specifically about the audit requirements. But today we just give you a flavor of Article 30 bis. So we think we have a very robust version of Article 30 bis that makes both the regulator, the government, and the industry happy. So new Article 30 bis will apply from audit year 2026 onwards. And as you have read before, the annual independent audits on compliance with Self-Regulation 2.1 with a limited assurance review will be performed, obviously, by a state-regulated audit firm. Here we also wish to thank very warmly all our members and Expert Suisse for the good work. Again, it's another sign that the self-regulation works and that the industry is committed. We drafted to manage the whole audit program and as well as Article 30 bis hand in hand with Expert Suisse and very swiftly, and I think that's very valuable. So more on the audit program next week. We'll also publish it next week in the 3 languages. The translations are being made as we speak. And then just before I hand over, we go to 30 ter. Yes, as we mentioned before, the audit is also going to be the link with the enforcement, right? Because the regulatory auditor will recognize existing audit reports and mention any serious findings in his audit report to FINMA. So here we have the connecting point to enforcement. So more on the audit next week, and moving on to another sign that we can adapt swiftly. Somebody came up with a question regarding the new members. It's true, each year we have a couple of members joining AMAS, and therefore there was also a lack in that regard. So now we provide clarity in that matter. So new members will have to comply with the self-regulation by the end of the first full financial year following the very first year, the year when they were admitted in, sorry. And obviously in paragraph 2 here, you see that is being supplemented by the timing regarding the audit provisions, which is also of paramount importance for members joining the association. So now we are leaving the text itself and we are moving on to the appendix. And Aurélia, do you want to comment on the investment approaches for real estate funds?
Exactly. So as mentioned also precedently, there is quite also there are 2 changes in the appendix, Annex 1 and 2, with specifications for real estate funds. We now have, you may recall that we have general approach, investment approach, that the one that I addressed earlier in the definition for that are broad, and here for real estate fund there was a need for specific definition, real estate being a very different asset class. So we have now a best-in-class approach, which is basically when investment decisions aim to outperform a benchmark or portfolio based on a specific criteria. We have climate alignment, where basically the fund is meeting Swiss legal climate targets or an internationally recognized net zero goal by 2050 with a mandatory plan. That was also that's part of the climate alignment definition. And on thematic, It's basically investing in property that address environmental or social dimensions of the different topics. So basically, those definitions and those approaches are now specified for real estate fund. We also have definitions on exclusions and integration, which you can also read through on the screen. Now, if we move on to Appendix 2, there was also a need to come up with specific sustainability goals as examples again. So it's not limited to those, but that gives you a hint of what could be considered as a sustainability goal for real estate funds. So basically, a portfolio construction and development on the basis of a binding criteria that gear the property portfolio to outperform a benchmark. That's what we mentioned earlier. Investment in property that outperform a benchmark, investment in property that contribute to a sustainability goal from an environmental standpoint or a social standpoint. And again, as I mentioned earlier, also the achievement or the alignment with the Swiss government's net zero target by 2050. That also could be different sustainability goals that apply to real estate funds. That's about it for the different amendments to the 2.1 version of the self-regulation of today. As Guillaume mentioned, there will be further clarification that Guillaume, you will address just now.
Yes, thanks, Aurélia. Moving on to further clarifications. So we mentioned that the self-regulation will improve. Just a very small preview of what is going to be published soon. We have the ESG building blocks for real estate funds, so the Bausteine. So as we mentioned before, the self-regulation is a living document, and we will need some adjustments. And we have a very active working group that has been working on Bausteine for the real estate funds, and the latter will be published soon. So there are twofold. On the one hand, you have the prospectus, and there you can find a general description of the investment policy and of the sustainable investment approaches that will be applied in paragraph 8 of the fund contract. You also have an indication of the percentage of the sustainable assets, a note on whether you have alignment or contribution to sustainability goals, and also a selection text for presentation of the applied investment approaches. So that's part 1, prospectus, and obviously you will have guessed that part 2 is going to be the fund contract. There will be a description of the sustainable investment goals and investment policy with reference to the alignment or contribution. And then there will also be a categorization of sustainable investment approaches according to Appendix 3 of self-regulation 2.1. There again, selection of text for detailed descriptions of each sustainable investment approach, text blocks for all approaches, and comments on sustainability key risks and risk control. As for the securities funds, the Bausteine are merely examples recommended by the association, and like the self-regulation itself, they are not recognized nor acknowledged by FINMA. But obviously we'll keep you posted as soon as these Bausteine are published. Moreover, we are also working on the update of the securities funds Bausteine, and secretly we hope that we can manage to do a joint release together with the one we just presented to you. Moving on to the next steps. So I think we mentioned it a couple of times today. The self-regulation will further improve. We're going to support the members with education. This webinar series is the perfect example. Our question and answer is updated on a very regular basis now. We know we have a lag of remaining questions, but you can ask any members that sitting in our working group legal sustainability, and they'll tell you how hard we are working to provide you answers. Today we do not offer in the webinar itself a Q&A, but as always we are very happy, and we are very happy to receive your questions in writing so that we can submit them to our working group. So that's also the way we do at AMAS. AMAS doesn't answer questions unless they are really crystal clear and we already have the answers, but otherwise everything is decided by the industry for the industry. By the way, the same rule applies for audit. So the working group audit that has worked on the audit program and on Article 30 bis is remaining and will cover any questions specifically related to the audit topic. The first audit questions are already implemented in the Q&A, and we have further working sessions, and a couple of questions are already answered and will be published in the next weeks in the Q&A. So that was on the member education. We are also working on a publication of an AMAS position paper on sustainability. This will be also reviewed by our expert committee sustainability. Aurélia will tell you more about this in a couple of seconds. Further improvements and changes, Adrian mentioned it already. We are going to clarify the situation regarding ESG integration and exclusion. This has been shifted now to the expert committee sustainability, which will give a recommendation, and then the board will decide by circular during the summer. We don't want to wait until September to have an answer to that question, and we know that we are late, and we apologize for that. I already touched upon the Bausteine for real estate funds. I already also touched about the Bausteine for securities funds that will come. Last but not least, I think obviously our self-regulation might also adapt to international developments, for instance, to SFDR. But again, I think we showed that we can do that quite swiftly with the industry. The only further improvement that is not listed here on the screen is the SIF assessment of the self-regulation 2.1 to the Federal Council. But obviously I touched upon that before, but that's also not to be forgotten, especially speaking about the data we will need to provide this assessment. So that's for the next steps. Maybe we can move, Aurélia, to explain a little bit what is going to happen with our new expert committee and explain to the members how the sausages are made.
Indeed. So as a way of background and before concluding, we wanted to go through how the self-regulation and how more broadly the sustainability topics are tackled and addressed within AMAS. So we are very happy to launch our sustainability expert committee early July. We used to have a joint AMAS and SSF working group when I started in 2021, and today we have 8 working groups related to sustainability. So there was definitely a need for an overarching body, which the board approved back in March. So the EC will meet for the first time on July 1st. It's composed, there is a great balance between smaller and larger members, and we ensure as much as possible also representation of Romandie and Swiss German members. We also have our friends from SBA and SIA as observer. Basically the goal, and that's been mentioned already, is to ensure that, for instance, on the topic of the self-regulation, recommendations are made when it comes to the question that was mentioned, but also take position on also our priorities or as Guillaume alluded to, also the sustainability position that we are working on. Where does it fit in terms of the AMAS government? That's where the expert committee sustainability fits. As you can see here, we have different types of gremium. We've got the expert committees where the new EC sustainability would be embedded together with basically joining the other committees, such as historically legal and compliance AM, real estate, and so on. We keep on basically the platforms that are a bit more open, and where there is also you have all the full list of the different platforms on the screen, and then, as mentioned, we have our working groups. That's where really basically the work is done. And maybe we can move. Here we've got a lot of ESG focused one, but it's not only about ESG. Here you see all the different working groups that are kind of standalone. So as I said earlier, quite a number of working groups. We've got dedicated working groups depending on the topics, and working groups are basically open and closed depending on the need. So for instance, we open one for the Swiss Stewardship Code, one for the Swiss Climate Scores. They are more or less active. What is also important to note is that for consultations, and Guillaume touched upon the green finance regulation. So whenever we have a consultation, we also create working groups that are not here on these slides, but that are basically open and close very agilely depending on those consultations and then on the need. So here the goal, and just maybe to conclude on that, the goal of the expert committee would really be to ensure also that institutes speak also with one voice across those different working groups, and that there is a recommendation when there might be some misalignment, and to provide obviously some direction and on the different priorities. I think moving on, we can go to
the newsletter.
Exactly.
The newsletter we launched last December already. So it's once per month. This summer we're probably going to do only one edition. The idea is not to be lengthy and wordy. The idea is to give you an overview of what is happening on the 3 levels: Switzerland, EU, international. Obviously, that's also the place where we keep you informed of what is happening regarding all self-regulation, all working groups, the FAQ, etc. So if you are interested, and if you are not receiving the Sustainable Asset Management newsletter, just drop us a line and we'll put you on the distribution list. The summer edition is going to be the last one we send out with our email addresses. The next one we are switching to MailChimp. This doesn't change much except for GDPR and other exotic requirements. So we'll ask you also if you wish to opt in and receive the newsletter via MailChimp. We mentioned it a couple of times today. We still have 2 webinars coming. We have the third one. We are on auditing the self-regulation, which is going to be really interesting. We are doing that in partnership with Dimitri Senik of PwC, who chairs the Expert Suisse committee, who helped us draft the audit program and the new article. So register yourself with the QR code for next Tuesday at 3. And then we will conclude the webinar series with webinar number 4, where we will provide you with early insights and case studies. A member agreed to give us insights, so I think that's going to also to be really interesting just before the summer. And on that note, we're happy to give you 15 minutes of your time back. I think being the 18th of June, everyone will appreciate that. And as always, Aurélia and myself remain at your disposal should you have any questions. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for having been here, and see you soon. Bye-bye.